Leading stories, trending topics, changing narratives. You're listening to the Critical Conversations podcast.
That's right. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Dr. Rick Daniels, and I serve as the Director of Institutional Equity and Inclusion right here at Oakton College. I know you're loving the new intro. I am too. We are trying to grow as an entity, and I'm so happy you've decided to join us again today. This episode is truly unique, and it's called Beyond the Rainbow, Strengthening LGBTQ+ Inclusion at Oakton College. Our goal today is to foster an inclusive dialogue that highlights the experiences, challenges, and opportunities for the LGBTQ+ community. In this episode, we'll provide actionable insights for improving systems and fostering a culture that uplifts all individuals. I'm excited today to be joined by a group of wonderful colleagues. All of them I've had the pleasure of working with individually and on some collective campus initiatives as well. And so before we get started, I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right in.
Hi, everyone listening in. My name is Cameron Carrara. I am currently an academic advisor at the Skokie campus. I am also the co-chair of the LGBTQIA2+ Advisory Council. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Cameron.
Hi, I'm Johanna Fine. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer here at Oakton College, and I reside mostly at the Des Plaines campus.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sebastian Contreras Jr., the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and the Dean of Student Success.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Hewitt. I'm a professor of anthropology and also of women, gender, and sexuality studies in the humanities. And I'm the coordinator of the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program at Oakton and an advisor of Pride Club.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for being here. Let's jump in. I was looking for a question to get started, and I'm a big fan of the arts. And so I thought it would be great to start off with a question about your favorite book, album, play, song. Tell me about something, movie, anything that has helped you to be seen or understood as a part of the LGBTQ+ community. In my case, I have some as an ally, but tell me about you. Give me a book or a song or an album or something that has helped you to feel seen and understood. And tell us a little bit about why that had an impact on you.
So one of the songs that I really love is by a British songwriter called Callum Scott. The song is called No Matter What, and basically it is almost like an ode to the coming out process and telling his mother and father about being gay. And the lyrics go, I love you no matter what. I just want you to be happy and always be who you are. And so that's basically his mother telling that to him after he's struggled to, go through the coming out process. So I think it's really meaningful. And it's something that I actually sent to my mom when I went through the coming out process. So it has a special place in my heart.
I came out later in life. I was 40, and I happened to be married to a man and had a 10-year-old daughter at the time. And I will always be thankful for Pink, the artist, and two songs that really resonate with me in my coming out process were Perfect and Raise Your Glass. And I always knew in life that I didn't always feel like I fit in. And I think one of the things that's so wonderful about Pink is that she's unapologetically who she is, which I always admired, even before I came out. And then listening to Raise Your Glass, it's really a song about raise your glass if you're, kind of a misfit. You don't fit in. You don't always
wrong in all the right ways.
Right, wrong in all the right ways. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that song had always been one of my favorites. And then right prior to me coming out, I think my subconscious was a little bit more aware, and the song came on at my best friend's 40th birthday party, and I went, Perfect came on, and I started to recognize that I was about to start crying. And I was in front of all of my friends and her friends, and I went running into the bathroom, and I just lost it and hysterically cried. And at the time, I didn't quite realize why, but I think it was because I was giving myself permission to be who I was. And so that song, those two songs always resonate with me in my coming out story.
Yeah, Pink is amazing.
Yeah, well, now that you're making me think about coming out, I'm thinking back to a book that was really important to me when I first came out. I felt like I was trying to consume all manner of all things gay. Like I was watching every bad movie, reading every book, and I stumbled upon Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And at the time, I actually hadn't read much of James Baldwin at all, so it's kind of interesting to come at him from this really canonical work of fiction and one of the earliest fictional novels about gay men, and explicitly so. And so it was through that I sort of discovered James Baldwin, not actually. And then, of course, later I was like, oh my gosh, and reading everything of his, and he's still probably one of my favorite academics. But what I also discovered is that one of the oldest, if not the oldest, LGBTQ bookstore in the United States was called Giovanni's Room, and it's in Philadelphia. And I actually got to go there. And so for me, that was like doubly awesome because I'm just a nerd like that. So I was really excited that I read the book, and then I got to go to the old bookstore. And sadly, I don't think that it's there anymore. But that's why we got to keep our independent bookstores alive.
Yeah.
So that people can stumble upon books like this.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I will say probably the movie that was most influential for me as I was coming out was this movie called The Broken Hearts Club, which was kind of like a romantic comedy set in West Hollywood. And it was a group of gay men who were close friends, whose lives were intertwined. And it just kind of was a story about their community, their level of support for one another, and then also a connection with an older gay man and kind of his role modeling of gay life. And it was a great movie. It was really the first movie that I had seen with all gay characters. Granted, all of the actors except for one were straight men acting in gay roles, but it was a great movie. And that kind of was just my first understanding and indication of the reality that I could have a group of really close gay male friends as I was coming out. Because I think for many of us in the coming out process, we don't think we could fall in love. We don't think we can be married. We don't think we can have a group of friends that are like us. So that was kind of nice to see that. And then I also had a Spanish professor in college who wrote a number of poems. So his name is Oscar Diaz Duque. Spanish professor at the University of Iowa. I tried finding a number of poems that he gave me when I had classes with him. At the time, I wasn't quote unquote out, but I think he saw something in me and kind of knew that I probably was gay, but just wasn't in the process or ready to come out. And he gave me a number of poems that I kept for a really long time, and I really tried looking hard for them. I just recently moved from my house to a condo a couple months ago. So it's somewhere. I just couldn't find it. But he also had a number of poems that were super influential.
I think it's great to be able to point out to people that had an impact on us on a certain part of our journey, who may have saw something in us at the time, as you mentioned. For me as an ally, there was two things, actually. There was a play that I saw once called Before It Hits Home. And coming from a religious family, I'm a pastor's kid, this helped me to reckon with some things that were happening in my family at the time. And it really helped me to see the humanity in something I frankly have been trained not to see the humanity in. And, you know, as much as I have some really wonderful life-defining experiences in church, growing up in church, that was one of them that I think helped push me into a space that was really unhealthy. And so besides some of the key relationships that I had, this play helped me to see the humanity that, you know, I had been conditioned not to see. And so the other thing too was, I don't know if this is true or not, and it's a theory, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always suspected that Bohemian Rhapsody was about coming out in some way. And listening to the lyrics, knowing a little bit about Freddie Mercury's story, I'm not a big Queen fan, but I loved that album, A Night at the Opera, and I've seen the movie. Listening to the lyrics, Mama, I just killed a man, I hope you come back for me. Like, these are things that made me say, I wonder if this was like his love letter to the people that he loved about him, you know, coming out or discovering something new about himself. So I don't know. I kind of see some faces of intrigue.
I don't know. I never thought about that.
I see some intriguing faces here. I've always suspected that song had
You might have
those
discovered
undertones.
something super deep that none of us even...
Right.
Yeah,
I want
goodbye,
to
everybody. You know, it's so many lines in that movie make me think that there was something deeper to it.
I want to go back and look at the lyrics.
Yeah,
again.
me too.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think, again, it's important to start at a place where we can, make a connection. And I think that we all have, movies, songs, or different things that allow us to see ourselves and to see others. Let's talk about culture, though. We're here at Oakton, and as I mentioned in some of our pre-meeting conversation, we're here. We're a part of the institution. Each of us have a stake as employees, as people, as valued members of the community. But I want to know for you, what is the culture like for LGBTQ plus students and employees at Oakton? What do you think that we're doing well? Where do we have room for growth?
Well, I'll share. I'm relatively new. Tomorrow's actually my 1-year anniversary here. So I still feel new in a lot of ways. And I think there's always an evaluation when going somewhere that you want to take I take a look at things like the website and the pictures and what clubs are a part, whether it's a college or whatever employment opportunity I was looking for. And I think that it was pretty apparent to me based on the values and the strategic vision that Oakton had that there's a strong emphasis on social justice, racial justice, inclusion. So that felt promising to me. It gave me a sense that, okay, people, my wife and I call them PLUs, or people like us. I was like, oh, PLUs are accepted here. It sort of gives you that indication that, okay. And then when I got here, meeting different people and having conversations, it felt comfortable pretty quickly just by observing folks and picking up on, either cues or comments that people made. So I think that is good. I do think that there is more opportunity for us to be a little bit more implicitly inclusive, where we could, I think with the organizations that we have from the student groups, it's very apparent that, we have Pride Club, we have different, councils that are very LGBTQ plus focused. But I think from an employer's perspective, we could do a little bit more in terms of having pride events that are for employees, for example. Just maybe looking at that. I know that our focus, obviously, being an institution, is on the students, and it should be. However, we also have employees working here who need to feel a part of things too.
I think that's a really great point, and I think it's something that we should absolutely invest in our staff, our employees. But I was thinking of you, Sebastian, because once upon a time there was a community of us that were trying to do something social or bring staff, faculty, admin together to socialize, but it's been
a decade at least.
It's
probably
been a while.
yeah.
But clearly there's a need for it, and especially looking at it from the perspective of somebody relatively new and who's looking at our culture and wondering where is the representation amongst the employees at Oakton.
Yeah, I've always felt that it was Oakton has always been an open community. I've never felt as if it was a celebratory community around being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. So it's been a weird experience. Certainly for me, me and Lindsay have probably been here the longest, probably like 13, 14, 15 years.
Yeah, I think like 15.
Yeah. So I've always felt comfortable coming out to individuals, but I've never felt as if the community celebrated us as LGBT members of this community of learners, community of practice, and community of people who spend a lot of time here. Again, I don't think there's any explicit discrimination against us, but there isn't necessarily a celebration. And I came from institutions in Chicago prior to coming here where there's a marked difference. It's a very different environment for employees who are out in a very different way of celebrating and connecting in community with one another.
There's like acceptance, there's recognition, and then there's celebration, right? And I'm hearing that there's acceptance, there's maybe even recognition, but the celebration may not necessarily be explicit. Yep. Sorry, Cameron, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, so I think of it in terms of like tolerance, acceptance, and advocacy. So I feel like we're somewhere in between tolerance and acceptance, because again, I feel like it's been a very open environment since I started about 5 years ago. But yeah, we're not quite to that like celebratory advocacy stage of things, which I would love to see us get there at some point. And I know as a advisory council, like we've been working to bolster student programming and now shifting over to becoming more of like a resource group on campus. We're going to be focusing a little bit more on employee engagement as an advisory council. So that's something that hopefully will be more noticeable, in the months and years to come. But yeah, I do feel like, again, I've never had a problem talking to people on campus or feeling comfortable talking to people on campus. But I do know that also feels a little bit different on the staff side versus maybe the faculty side sometimes, at least from what I've heard from students and their experiences interacting with some folks on campus. So I think there's just a wide variety of experiences on both the student and the staff and faculty side, and familiarity with like LGBTQ culture and pronouns and gender identification is definitely something that we could educate more people on. So that's something that I could see us doing more of. I think we're doing a good job in some areas, but there's, I think, more education that needs to be done in some others.
From a system standpoint, what are some of the systemic changes that we can be thinking about that needs to be made? You talked about advocacy. You talked about the LGBTQ plus advisory council and how you're shifting to really looking at the needs and concerns of employees, which I think is really important because I've said openly, I love that Oakton is a student-centered institution, but I think that we can't be student-centered at the expense of the employees in the workforce, because we need to come into an environment where we feel like we're included, like we belong, that's equitable for us, so we can give our best selves back to our students. So from a systemic perspective, what ways can Oakton help to move more into the advocacy space?
Well, I definitely think about professional development and the work that we do around diversity, equity, and inclusion training. I think that sometimes in the past, LGBTQIA plus advocacy or education has been kind of an add-on or almost separated out from some of the other aspects of diversity that we really work hard to represent and to educate ourselves about. So I think recognizing the intersectionality of when we're talking about anti-racism, we're also talking about transphobia and fighting it, and homophobia and fighting it, and that we can't disentangle these identities. But
James Baldwin.
Yes, exactly.
That's a Baldwin idea. Absolutely.
He's so wonderful. Please read him, listeners, if you haven't. But I do think that having a space explicitly for educating around gender identity and expression around sexuality, similar to a safe zone training or safer space training, which we haven't done in quite a while, but that I think would be really useful, because I think we have a lot of great projects that are in motion, like with the pronoun email signatures and gender neutral bathrooms, which we've had for a little while now. Yep. But if people don't understand what those are, if they aren't sort of integrating education around that in their classrooms or in their offices, then I think we still have a ways to go before we get to advocacy. So I think that some of that training is necessary to create the spaces we want in the classroom and in our office.
Yeah, so that the advocacy can be real.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of room, and to me, that's an easy opportunity for us to achieve that doesn't take a lot of finance or lift, for example, but would be really helpful. I find often when I talk to people that as they get to know me in my human resources realm, they're more comfortable with me as a person, because I think one of the things that is often hard, and this isn't just about LGBTQ+, but it's about anything, when you're speaking to someone who might have either a different viewpoint or a different cultural background, it's that bridge of how do you ask a question and come from a place of wanting to learn and understand, and not being afraid to ask because you don't want to offend someone or hurt their feelings or sound ignorant. But if you're open to having that dialogue and getting to know somebody, oftentimes then you're more comfortable in asking questions. And then people realize you're just Johanna, or you're just Lindsay, or you're just Sebastian, like Cameron. Like, we're just who we are. And that's only one part of us. And so I think having more education around how to be more aware and ask a question. I mean, I don't have all the answers, and none of us do. And so, but do I feel more comfortable asking? Yes, maybe that's because I am in the LGBTQ plus community. But for those folks who aren't, they might be afraid to ask those kinds of questions. And so having that training, I think, would really be beneficial.
Good faith questions.
Yeah.
Is what I've heard those referred to.
I also think structurally, at least from my experience, advocacy sometimes is a little bit easier too when you have a dedicated staff person or team, as well as like a physical space on campus, like a resource center. I feel like we have a lot of people doing a lot of things on campus, and people are trying to do their best to advocate in different spaces. But I feel like it's just difficult to do with the minute manpower that we have currently. So it would just be nice to have more dedication to that, again, from kind of a physical space perspective or an employee perspective, because again, we are all doing different jobs and doing work on the side. And so sometimes I know for myself, it's hard to, be able to advocate 100% of the time, because you're stuck between multiple things or doing multiple things. So it just would be nice to have those dedicated spaces and resources as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think as an organization, we need to name that we are a heterosexist-centered organization, right? Most of the folks that are here and that make up the institution and the organization are heterosexual. And that then influences the ways in which LGBTQIA employees feel comfortable on campus. I've studied a lot about psychological safety, and you can't come to work and show up and be your full, authentic self unless you feel psychologically safe within the environment. And I think to Cameron's point, I think it's hard for many individuals who are LGBTQ. The coming out process personally, as well as sometimes professionally, has been very difficult and triggering. And when you have an advisory council that's associated with human resources, and I'm a new employee and I'm trying to understand the community and the campus climate and the culture at an institution, I don't know that if I had a really awful triggering experience at a different institution, that I would want to be associated with an advisory council that is an arm of HR, right? And so to Cameron's point, there is, I think, a need for a space, a center that's not affiliated with HR, but that's affiliated with the campus community, the climate, as it relates to creating a space that's psychologically safe for both employees and for students. And I don't know that I don't know that the best way to do that is through an arm of HR.
So are you suggesting then that there needs to be a specific campus space dedicated for employees and students, or just employees?
I would say both, because our connection, our relationship and our experiences are so connected. As Lindsay said earlier, there's a lot of intersectionality that happens, and we experience this community not just as employees or just as students, but as a Oakton community. And so I think a center where everyone is invited into and can engage and be a part of the conversation and part of that community can only strengthen the ways in which our students and employees who are LGBTQ to feel connected, to feel a part, and to feel safe here. Because it's not always, people haven't always had safe experiences coming out in previous employment spaces.
And I also feel like having that space helps to humanize staff and faculty to the students. So having a space where we can all congregate together and have meaningful conversations is a very important thing. And that's where I feel like the advocacy starts. And I also feel like then students are able to see themselves in us more, maybe than they currently do, and to have more of that interaction with us versus like a random conversation in the hall or maybe like after class for a couple minutes, just having
chance encounters.
Yeah. Having more chance encounters, I think would be helpful.
Johanna, can I come back to you in terms of what Dr. Contreras said about HR? Do we need to do more bridge building in HR? Do we need to send more messages that we're welcoming and open? What you mentioned about Dr. Contreras about coming out professionally spoke to me a little bit, and I've never thought of it that way. I've always looked at it as sort of a personal process, but from a professional sense, I can imagine that if you've had some triggering experiences in the past, that creates a sort of different environment that you're walking into. Johanna, from an HR perspective, is there anything that we can do better to provide an environment where people feel like they can trust us enough as an entity to advocate for their needs?
I think it's a yes and. I think that so within my first 6 months of being here, I took a look at all the policies and procedures that the college has and went through every single one of them and changed every pronoun from he, she, his, hers to they, them, their. And
You remember you handed me the big policy book?
yes, I did. And I went through them. And so I think that there is room in HR to be more implicitly inclusive. And I also feel that there is room for an example like what Cameron talked about, where, and Lindsay and Sebastian, you talked about the fact that years ago there used to actually be an effort amongst faculty and staff administrators to get together who are within the community. And I think both would be amazing. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to have more time with my peers who happen to be LGBTQ plus that I didn't necessarily know. I mean, you can make assumptions or you can look and not be sure, but to have that space to go and really get to know people would build the community as employees, in addition to have that bridge with the students. So I think both are important. I think it's important that HR is a safe place, but I also recognize that it doesn't matter how nice I am or how soft my lighting is in my office. People may not want to talk to me because of who I am in my role here at Oakton. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with my role. And it's lonely, I recognize that. But I also think that there should be a space outside of human resources. So I think it's both. I think we have a lot of training we can do. And I think we also have a lot of initiatives we can participate in together as employees and with the students to really bridge that.
And I was just going to say, in terms of like the training side of things, I know for me, like, because we as an advisory council did do like a kind of train the trainer for Safe Zone last spring. And we got folks kind of involved in that who are currently staff and faculty who wanted to be involved in becoming a trainer. And it's been a little bit hard to kind of get off the ground because, again, I think we just don't have like the manpower to do it all like within the council. So that's one of those things where I would love to see more of a collective effort from across campus to kind of help bring more training and education to staff and faculty, not just, within this small kind of core group, which I think is important to have that group, but we just need more help, I would say, because we're doing our best, and I think that we still as well can improve in that area.
Yeah, if I could jump on that just real quick, is that also when we're talking structural, we're talking resources, and when we're talking resources, we are actually talking money. So if we are talking about the institution putting money, if we want a physical space, if we want people to be able to organize a training on campus, that requires a lot of resources. And a lot of the members of the advisory council I know are wearing many hats and stretched very thin. And so if this was something that was broader than, if it really was, this sort of is leading into, I guess, the next question, like allyship from and inclusivity from across the institution, then it shouldn't just be the advisory council that would be responsible for like putting on this training, but that rather it would be either, I don't know, part of Learning Day or something much broader. I did want to add one little piece, which is from the student, thinking about my students, and one area of intersection that I'm not sure that I'm still educating myself on, and I'm not sure that we've really looked at this, but the intersections between LGBTQIA identity and neurodiversity. And I feel like there's a really big need there and a lot of education. And I see so much progress Oakton is making in terms of thinking about neurodiversity and how we can best support our students. But I feel like there is a strong overlap there. I don't want to make any sort of psychological claims here, but that we just know that just by sheer population numbers, there's going to be a lot of students that are neurodiverse and LGBTQ plus identified. So when I think back to money and structure, I think that training for counselors, having more counselors, which is always an ask, I realize that. And by the way, Oakton's counselors are like, bar none, absolutely amazing. So shout out to the counselors, take advantage of them. But if we could only like multiply them by 100, I think that we would really be able to do some good work here.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Intersectionality. Shout out to Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, who coined the term from a legal perspective, and the research around critical race theory we know that's applicable to so many different communities. I think it's really interesting here that you mentioned that, because that's been the conversation around neurodiversity that I've tried to be a champion of since we've had it. How are we looking at the intersections? Because I think that how we respond to people who are neurodiverse is uniquely connected to the biases that we carry around their intersections. And so what are we doing to provide education and allyship around that as well? So I'm grateful for those comments. Let me wrap the discussion up in one sort of question that ties in the last two questions that we have. I want to talk a little bit about collective wins. Oakton, in my opinion, has a little bit of a halo effect sometimes. Sometimes we talk a lot ad nauseum almost about what we do well. But I also think that sometimes we can kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit about what we need to do better. And a large part of this conversation has talked about where we need to improve. I would love to end this on hearing from you around maybe a success story or a high note or a positive experience that you've had with a colleague or a student or an initiative that we've done that made you feel seen, that made you feel understood, or that helped you to feel, as you mentioned, people like us, or that, I matter here. Tell me, if you're willing or if you're able, about a positive experience that you've had that helps us to affirm what we're at least trying to do to center the needs and concerns of the LGBTQ plus community at Oakton.
Yeah, I'll say, this particular experience kind of reminded me that people are always paying attention, even when you don't think people are paying attention. And so in this particular instance, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I had a former younger staff member come up to me and say, "Hey, Sebastian, you know what? I just want to let you know that I really appreciate how open you are about being gay, about, at the time I wasn't married, but I was with my partner, my now deceased husband, but we were together in a relationship." And this former younger staff member was like, "Hey, I just want to say thank you for just being so open and honest and brave to just talk about your partner in ways that I've not heard other older individuals talk about. I've never been comfortable being out, and you make it comfortable for me to think about coming out." And so to me, that was an indication of, hey, I'm just being me. I'm not trying to model or be a role model or be a mentor to individuals, but people are watching. And, and for many of us with quote unquote titles, even more people are watching, and we don't necessarily know they're watching. And to me, that was just a nice confirmation of how good it is to be authentically myself, right? Like, many of us spent lots of years in a closet where we could not be authentically ourselves, and the energy and the anxiety and the fear that comes with all of that, to be a prisoner to other individuals and their beliefs. And so to be able to live out and be at work and feel psychologically safe to be out, and to not hesitate about talking about, my gay partner at the time, that certainly is a win, I think, for the community at Oakton, and also just for, I think, a reminder that even when I don't think anyone's paying attention, someone's paying attention. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was going to say, just a win for me, just because it's something that I'm more heavily involved in, is the creation of the LGBTQIA Advisory Council. Obviously, I believe it was 2021 or 2022 that we, created the charter for the group. So it's been for a majority of the time that I've been here at Oakton. And since then, I do feel like we have championed a lot more programming efforts, specifically, again, towards students, but just with LGBTQIA History Month, actually trying to create a safe zone program again. We have been doing our Night of Noise drag show the last couple years.
Yes.
Snaps
to that.
Yeah.
We are, going to be doing a couple of different viewings. One in particular, we have a documentary viewing of Nelly Queen coming up on May 1st. And that's going to include like a discussion with the director of that documentary. We also have Chris Mosier coming to campus, who's an All-American trans athlete. So, I think like we're doing more than we did, or it seems like than we did prior to even when I came here. And, so again, I feel like we're making the steps and taking the effort, but there's still just so much more that we can do with the appropriate amount of manpower and advocacy from across campus.
Yes, give Cam his flowers. He has done so much work. And the Night of Noise, the drag show, I've had Pride Club students that attended the very first one, and they were just, I mean, it was like a dream come true. They were living it up, dancing, and the cafeteria was transformed into a nightclub. It was pretty awesome.
Got my dollar bills from Chase.
Oh, yeah. You need to be prepared.
Yep.
And this year we're moving it to one of the theaters on campus, so it's going to be hopefully a little bit more vibing and ambiance driven. So
Black box.
The black box. So
Queens.
Yeah,
Awesome.
The Black Box Theater is already a club. Like, if you take a look at it, it's perfect size for something like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're doing stuff. We're trying to make moves and trying to make changes. So, more to come. But yeah, a collective effort across campus is always appreciated.
Yeah, excellent.
From my own perspective, like I'm always really impressed by what the students can achieve and how much the students are advocates for themselves. And many Pride Club members have been really involved in the Student Government Association and really active in collaborating with other clubs on campus and also being a voice for the LGBTQIA plus community, because I mean, you can hear faculty drone on anytime you want, but to hear students really share their lived experience, I think is far more powerful, especially for creating structural change. So the more that we can uplift them, the better. And I just want to highlight that tonight, Oakton Athletics is hosting a Pride Night, like the basketball team.
No way.
Awesome.
Yeah, I am. Where did you get that?
I was going to say.
Sorry, audience, you can't see this fabulous shirt that I'm going to try and
rainbow
steal.
Oakton Owl shirt that the athletics will be handing out for free to anyone who attends tonight. So
that is cool.
So go if you can.
Yeah, but this is like brand new. So this is like when you ask like what's a sign of allyship or what's a sign of progress? What can we celebrate? Like this is amazing that we're going to have our own Pride Night. So yeah, hopefully it'll be a regular thing.
Yeah, hopefully. Can you tell us, Cameron, real quick, tell the listeners how they can get involved with the advisory group if they're interested?
Yeah, so you can either reach out to me directly. Again, I work in the advising office. You also can reach out to our LGBTQIA Advisory Council email, which is up on the website. So we do have a dedicated page for LGBTQIA2+ resources that you can find on the Oakton website. So just make sure that you're checking that out and connecting with our council members on whatever you may need or any suggestions that you have. We're open to any and all ideas. And again, we're hoping to continue to engage our employees more as well as our students.
Awesome. Any final takeaways before we wrap up today?
Thank you for having us.
Yes, it's been very fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing and being part of the conversation. And we'll see you on the next episode.
The Critical Conversations podcast is recorded at Oakton College, located at 1600 East Gulf Road, Des Plaines, Illinois. The show is sponsored in part by the Oakton College Educational Foundation, produced by Erick, Rohn, coordinated by Brenda, Cruz, and hosted by Dr. Rick Daniels. For more information or to connect with us, email critsconpod@gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for more Critical Conversations.